A father sat down for a chat with his 16-year-old son. The father's a good friend of mine and an excellent salesman, so he had a pad of paper and a pen with him, because it's always better if you can illustrate your point while you're making it. And while his son watched with interest, Jim drew a fairly good likeness of a goose. And behind the goose, he drew 3 eggs. And he said to his son, Jimmy, those are golden eggs. And that's the goose that lays the golden eggs. Now, if you had your choice of buying one or the other, which would you buy? And his son said, well, I'd buy the goose, of course. Of course you'd buy the goose, his father said. You'd invest your money in the goose because it could go on laying those golden eggs for years. Sure, his son said, anyone would. Yes, Jim went on, anyone would if they were presented it in this way. But the fact of the matter is, son, that most people have the exact opportunity, and yet they invest in eggs instead of the goose. Now the boy was quite interested, and he asked his father what he meant, and his father said, in this little quiz I've given you, the goose and the golden eggs are, of course, symbolic. The golden eggs people invest in are represented by their homes, cars, television sets, furniture, refrigerators, stoves, boats, vacations, all the good things they can buy. All the good things everyone wants to have and should have. Well, what's wrong with that, the boy asked. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, Jimmy. It's just that most of them invest in golden eggs exclusively and don't invest enough in the goose that provides all these golden eggs. You see, the goose that lays the golden eggs is the breadwinner. The more money invested in him, the more golden eggs he can provide. Now, take you, for example, Jimmy, he said. You're 16, and like most boys your age, you don't know what you want to do with your life yet. You're confused. You haven't really been giving your best to your schoolwork because you're not sure you'll need a lot of the subjects you're studying after you get out of school. And not knowing what to do after you're an adult, you don't know what you'd want to major in at college. Now, what I want you to understand is that as long as you're getting an education, you're investing, we're both investing in this goose. The more we invest here, the more golden eggs you'll be able to provide for yourself and your family someday. And if you're really smart, you'll never stop investing in the goose, even after college. Each year, you'll invest a percentage of your income in your continuing education. And each year, you'll find, well, that you're becoming more valuable as a person, able to provide still more and more of these golden eggs you and your family will want. Do you understand that, Jimmy? The boy was silent a long time, and he said, yes, I think I do, Dad. I think I do. Now, just a moment for this message. After my friend had his little illustrated talk with his son, as he told me later, the boy looked at the illustration a long time, then he picked it up, folded it, put it in his pocket, and went off to do his homework. I'm sure you find it as amazing as do the rest of us that the great majority of people have to learn things the hard way. It's only natural to think that if a great discovery were made in a particular generation, all the succeeding generations would know about it and utilize it for their own good. But in many things, such is not the case. It's true with inventions and discoveries which obviously affect our lives, but it frequently is not true when it comes to the great laws which determine the direction of our individual destinies. One time, a group of laborers was hired to work on a farm. These people came from a very small, remote village where motor vehicles were still very scarce. They were enjoying a new experience of being transported on the back of a truck when they came to the place where they thought they were supposed to get off. Well, without giving it a thought, apparently, they simply stepped off the back of the speeding truck. Now, fortunately, they fell on a soft dirt road, not a paved highway, but even then, the results of their unconventional method of disembarking were, to say the least, surprising. They went bounding, spinning, sliding, and cartwheeling along the dusty road for quite a distance before gravity and friction, working together, finally brought them to an astounded halt. Well, none was seriously injured. In fact, by the time the terrified driver got back to them, they were laughing uproariously about the whole thing. The truck driver, in explaining the incident later, put the blame on their never having ridden in trucks before. Well, that's the obvious answer, but not the right one. The amazing circus tumbling act on a remote farm road had been caused by ignorance of a law that operates the same whether a truck, a boat, an airplane, or any moving body is involved. Sir Isaac Newton gave us the law, and it goes like this. A body in motion tends to remain in motion until acted upon by an outside force. When the workers stepped off the back of the speeding truck, they were going the same speed as the truck itself. The outside force was gravity, which pulled them down to the road, still traveling at the same speed. And, well, you get the idea. They had been hurt, confused, frightened, and turned upside down because of their ignorance of a law of physics. They might have been killed. Now, all over the world, there are millions of people who are being hurt, confused, frightened, and whose lives are turned upside down because they don't understand the principal law on which everything in the universe operates. The law of cause and effect. This law has been written thousands of times by the greatest minds the world has produced, and as a result has appeared in many forms. For our purposes, it might best be put this way. Our rewards in life will always match our service. It's another way of saying, as ye sow, so shall ye reap. And it's been written in many ways, in every language on earth. I like to think of this law in the form of a giant apothecary scale. One of the bowls is marked service, and the other is marked rewards. Now, whatever we put into the bowl marked service, the world will match in the bowl marked rewards. If any person alive is discontented with his rewards, he should examine his service. Action, reaction. As ye sow, so shall ye reap. What you put in will determine what you must get back in return. So simple, so basic, so true, and yet so misunderstood. If a business is not expanding to the quick and exciting tempo of the times, it must examine its contribution, its service. If a person is unhappy with his income, he must examine and reevaluate his service. Never before in the history of the world have human beings been so interdependent. It's as impossible to live without serving others as it would be to live if others were not constantly serving us. And this is good. The more closely knit this interdependence becomes, the greater will be human achievement. We all seek rewards, and we should understand that rewards come in two forms, tangible and intangible. That is, rewards include the money we earn, the home we buy, the car we drive, the clothes we wear, and they also include the way we feel, our happiness, our peace of mind, our inner satisfaction, the people we meet and enjoy. But remember this, whatever it is you seek in the form of rewards, you must first earn in the form of service to others. All attempts to abrogate, to sidestep this law will end in failure, frustration, and if maintained long enough, ultimate demoralization. We can see this frustration on every side. We can see it in the tense, strained, and nervous faces, in the mountains of tranquilizers which are consumed every day. And we can also see it in the slack, bovine-like faces of those who have found the whole thing too complicated and have simply given up, surrendered to the push and pull of circumstances. How much of this do you suppose is due to misunderstanding or ignorance of this simple and wonderful law of nature? It's my belief that a great deal can be traced to this cause. Now, do you understand this law, fully understand it, intellectually and emotionally? If you do, you can chart a wonderful course through life. Just as the field workers stepped off a speeding truck, just as a child will put its fingers in the way of a closing door, just as a speeding driver discovers he's not going to make the curve, how many times have you been confounded because you acted contrary to the rules, not just the rules of man, but the rules of nature? How many times have you been in the position of the man who sat in front of the empty fireplace and said, "Give me heat, and then I'll give you some wood"? People seem to be divided into those who understand that the wood must be put in before they can expect warmth, and those who feel they should get warmth whether they put anything in or not, or who feel they should get maximum heat from too small a supply of wood. A man's discontent can be said to be represented by the distance between what he has and what he wants. Once he's achieved that which he wants, the odds are good that he'll want still more. For that's the way of people, and that's good. That's a healthy sign. Constructive discontent is what gives us our continuing upward spiral of civilization. So do this if you haven't already. Determine what it is you want. Look objectively at the place in which you now find yourself. Consider the distance separating you from your goal, and determine ways of increasing your service so you will build a bridge across it. This puts thinking and creative activity into living. It also assures us that our goals can be achieved by individual effort. A person's world can be compared to a plot of ground. It exists, it's there. It has inherent within itself an amazing potential, and it's prepared to react to man's every action. In fact, it must. Now, whatever your job happens to be, think of it for a moment as this plot of ground. Planting the plot is only the first step. We are given the plot, and that's all we should be given. It's what we do with it that will determine its degree of greatness and success. It's like the story of the preacher who was driving by a beautiful farm. The fields were cultivated and abundant, with well cared for crops. The fences, house, and barns were clean, neat, and freshly painted. A row of fine trees led from the road to the house, where there were shaded lawns and flower beds. It was a beautiful sight to behold. So when the farmer working in the field got to the end of a row near the road, the preacher hailed him and said, "God has blessed you with a beautiful farm." The farmer stopped and thought a moment and replied, "Yes, he has, and I'm grateful. But you should have seen this place when he had it all to himself." You see, the farmer understood that he had been blessed with a fine farm, but he was also aware that it was his own love and labor which had brought it to its present state. In thinking of ways of increasing your service, read books on your specialty. Read what others have found to work well for them. But at the same time, think of original and creative ways of increasing your service, ways that are unique with you and the way you are. Each morning and during the day, ask yourself this question: how can I increase my service today? Knowing that my rewards in life must be in exact proportion to my service. Now do this every day and you will have started to form one of life's most valuable habits. Horace Mann wrote, "If any man seeks for greatness, let him forget greatness and ask for truth, and he'll find both." You see, you can cut away all the confusion and complications and nagging worries and vague, half-formed fears by returning to the great truth, the great laws, the great verities on which all success, all accomplishment, the whole world is built. If you're worried about your income or your future, you're concentrating on the wrong end of the scale. Look at the other end. Concern yourself only with increasing your service, with becoming great where you are, and your income and your future will take care of themselves. In William James' essay on Vital Reserves, he wrote, "Compared with what we ought to be, we're only half awake. Our fires are damped, our drafts are checked. We're making use of only a small part of our possible mental and physical resources." Stating the thing broadly, he went on, "The human individual thus lives usually far within his limits. He possesses powers of various sorts which he habitually fails to use. He energizes below his maximum, and he behaves below his optimum." All right, how can we correct the situation? William James gave us the answer. He wrote, "Either some unusual stimulus fills them with emotional excitement, or some unusual idea of necessity induces them to make an extra effort of will. Excitement, ideas, and efforts, in a word, are what carry us over the dam." All right, let your goal represent the excitement. Your ideas and efforts will weigh down the service end of the scale, and the rewards must and will follow. They'll be yours. They are yours the moment you realize this truth. Back in 1956, I wrote and recorded something we called The Strangest Secret. Without advertising or fanfare of any kind, It outsold all other non-musical, non-entertainment type recordings. It's been heard by millions and millions of people throughout the free world, and in the process created a brand new industry. Learning through listening. On one of these solid-state cassette tape players. This player has revolutionized the learning process. Now people listen in their automobiles while driving to and from work and on sales calls, time that was formerly wasted, on their commuter train with the little earpiece, in the bathroom while shaving in the morning, at the dinner table with the children gathered around the table and the whole family together for a change. This has made a tremendous difference in the business of learning. But getting back to The Strangest Secret, what makes a bestseller? What was there about that recording that caused millions of people to want to hear it over and over again and let their children hear it and play it for their employees and their sales forces? Well, I'm making a talk here today in which I'll cover the highlights and philosophy of The Strangest Secret, and I'd like to invite you to join us, and I hope you find it of some value. I want to tell you the most interesting story in the world. Why a person becomes the person he becomes. Why a little boy or a little girl grows up to be the kind of person he or she becomes. Now, the estimates by the experts in this field are that most of us are using somewhere around 5% of our real potential. Some experts say as little as 1%. It means that we're only giving about 5% of ourselves to what we're doing, to our days, our work, our families, everyone we know, our entire environment. But it also means that we're only experiencing 5% of the fun, 5% of the joy, 5% of the rewards we could be knowing, or less. All the experts are agreed that in each of us, there are deep reservoirs of ability, even genius, that we habitually fail to use. Why? We know that most people desire by nature to succeed. But what is success? What is this word that has become so famous in the world? What does it mean? Most people don't know what success is all about. And since they don't know what it's about, they really don't know where to look for it. Success is really nothing more than the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. This means that any person who knows what he's doing and where he's going is a success. Any person with a goal toward which he's working is a successful person. This means that the boy in high school who's working toward a diploma, or the boy in college toward a degree, is just as successful as any human being on earth, because he knows what he's doing, why he's getting up in the morning, and where he's going. But conversely, if a person doesn't know what he's working toward, what it is he wants, doesn't have a goal toward which he's working, then he must, at least by this definition, be called unsuccessful. Why isn't then, with this simple definition, why isn't everyone successful? Should be easy. Yet surveys indicate that 19 out of 20, 95% at least, are not. In fact, a survey one time asked thousands of working men why they got up in the morning and went to work, and 19 out of 20 didn't know. 19 out of 20 working people didn't have the foggiest notion of why they got up in the morning and went to work. Under closer questioning, they said, well, everybody works. Well, that would be a good reason to quit. In fact, here's a little rule of thumb you might want to remember. Whatever the great majority is doing under any given circumstance, if you do exactly the opposite, you'll probably never make another mistake as long as you live. Just something to keep in the back of your mind. The problem with most people is that they're playing the world's most unrewarding game. And the name of the game is follow the follower. There's a story about a small town in which there was a jewelry store, and like all jewelry stores, or most jewelry stores at least, he had a big clock in his window. And every morning for years, he'd noticed a working man stop, adjust his pocket watch to the same time as the clock in the window. He'd been doing this for many years, and one morning the jeweler was out in front sweeping a sidewalk, and so he asked the man, he said, tell me, why do you adjust your watch to my big clock every morning? I've noticed you're doing that for years. The man said, well, I'm the foreman down at the big plant. He said, I want to make sure my watch is correct because I blow the quitting whistle every night at 5 o'clock. The jeweler looked at him rather strangely for a minute, and he said, well, that's funny. He said, I've been setting that big clock in the window by that quitting whistle all these years. A very logical thing, but they could have been off 6 months. It was a case of a person just going along with what he thought to be correct without checking his references. So I want to suggest that from now on out, at least we do that we check our references and ask ourselves, are the people I'm following going where I want to go? Let me tell you the story of what we might call the average young man in our society. Now, from the time this boy is born, there's only one thing on earth he can do, and that's to begin to think, act, and talk like the people by whom he's surrounded. This is all in the world he can do. But right off the bat, the odds are 95 to 5 that he's thinking, acting, and talking like the wrong group. They're wonderful people. They love him. They'd do anything in the world for him. They want him to succeed. But the odds are 95 to 5 they haven't got the answers he needs if he's to reach fulfillment as a human being, if he's to reach this success that he wants, if he's to reach into these deep reservoirs of ability and genius we know he possesses and draw it out. Well, he starts in school. The most important thing to a little boy in school is to be liked by the other little boys in school. And so at this tender age, he begins to follow other little boys his same age who don't know any more than he knows and who do not necessarily have any capacity for leadership. And he does this in the first grade, and the second, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth, and the sixth, and the seventh, and the eighth, and year after year after year, he forms himself into a composite average of other little boys his age, trying to be like them, trying to do the only thing in the world that's impossible for a human being to do, which is to be like somebody else. Now, let's say he goes all the way through school, usually goes in the military service. Again, he's caught in a vice-like grip of conformity. Now, let's say he's 25 years old, out of school, out of service. What's he going to do? As a rule, he'll go back to his hometown, unless he's married, in which case he'll go to his wife's hometown. But let's say he goes back to his own hometown. He's single. He doesn't know quite what to do. He's standing on a corner one morning, and a friend that he knew in school comes up and says, hi there, Charlie, what are you doing? He says, nothing. He says, why don't you come down and work where I work? It's a pretty good place. The pay's regular. We got all kinds of fringe benefits and so on, and so he does. The odds are about, again, 95 to 5 that his first job is taken as a result of random application. On the job, without thinking about it, the most natural thing in the world for him to do is to look around, see how the other guys are doing their job, and to begin doing his the same way, assuming that what is normal for them is normal for him. No reason for this. He doesn't think about it. He just does it. Now, he has stretching in front of him 50 years or more in the golden age that man has been dreaming of since the days of ancient Greece. What's he going to do with these 50 golden years? Well, let's take a close look at him. We know that he works 40 hours a week as a rule. 40 hours a week, which leaves him 72 hours a week when he's neither working nor sleeping. 72 free discretionary hours each week to do with as he pleases. Now, at this point, of course, he's married. He has his little house and his little car. And this is about what he does with his free 72 hours every week. He'll do what the other fellows are doing with their free 72 hours every week, which is virtually nothing at all. On a typical day, he'll quit right on the dot, get in his little car, go to his little house, go in his little kitchen, kiss his little wife, and say, I'm tired. They've even figured out why he says that. The experts believe that he used to hear his father say that back when men used to get tired working during the day, and he picked it up and he repeats this every night when he gets home. He bolts his little meal and then heads for the living room where he turns on his escape box. Click. Takes 15 or 20 seconds for the screen to light up, a period of time he finds interminable, but he gets through it somehow. Maybe kicks the dog or thumbs through a magazine or something. But then the screen lights up, and he does too a little bit, and there in front of him, he sees people in all kinds of funny old-time costumes, all killing each other at a great rate. One expert has agreed that the average family can see more death and bloodshed and carnage on his television set in a week than Crassus saw when he crucified 6,000 prisoners on the southern road to Rome. But you know how those experts are. He could certainly be off one or two. But he sits there for about 5.5 or 6 hours. 25% of all free time now is spent in front of the tube, according to the latest statistics. Now, there's nothing wrong with this particularly, except that he's watching other people who are earning excellent incomes in the pursuit of their careers, while he doesn't make a nickel and gets the only two things you can get from watching TV on that kind of a schedule. He gets red eyes and a hollow head. Now, this is not meant to be an indictment of television. I've got a couple of television sets at home, too. I have a couple of cars at home, too, but I don't go home at night and drive around the block for 6 hours. If there's someplace I want to go, fine, my car will take me there. If there's a great program, like a golf match or something like that, I want to see it. But he sits there for 6.5 hours until finally his wife, who's a little more practical than he is, taps him on the shoulder and she said, Charlie, I think it's about time you went to bed. You've got to get up in the morning, go to work. And he's okay, and he shuts it off. He knows how to do that. He just shuts it off and goes to bed. Next morning he gets up and he does this all over again. He does this every day for 40 years. At the end of 40 years, he's retired, which always kind of catches him by surprise. No one's ever figured that one out either. And then he dies at 85 or 90, the way medical science is moving us along, out of sheer boredom. Well, what's the problem? Is there a tragedy here? Not really, if that's the way Charlie wants to spend his life, our mythical, hypothetical young man. If he wants to spend his life that way, that's his business. He lives in a free society, he can do anything with it he wants. But there's a terrible tragedy here if he's living that way because of the total lack of a decision. If he's living that way simply because he's still doing what he was doing in the first and second grade, and that's going along with the fellows up and down the block on the unspoken assumption that they know how to live, then there's a real tragedy there. Because they've never known how to live. Not in all the recorded history of mankind. He never finds out who he is. He never reaches into the deep depths of his abilities, his talents. He never learns that he can have just about anything he wants in the world, that he can call his own shots, tell his own fortune. And it's kind of a pity. Well, what's needed? Well, what's needed, I think, is a checklist. Like an airplane pilot uses. I think that living successfully is as important as flying an airplane. And here's some of the things that I think should be on that checklist.